Let's give it another go. All right, just for those of you who missed it, I am Edward Mason, the Warden, that is the visible head or the front guy for this temple of Our Lady of the Stars. This began just a year ago in Toronto, and we have been initiating and training people in a Thelemic version of the Golden Dawn mysteries for the past 12 months. The topic for today is public movement, private paths, and the difference between the two aspects of Thelema. I chose this sometime back in February, and when I've done this kind of thing before, I'll sort of mull it over for a couple of days and sit down at the computer with one idea buzzing in my head. And usually about 4 hours later, I've got the whole structure of what I want to say done. This time it took me about 2 weeks, and I thought, I think I got it, and then no, that was kind of a weird talk. So I'll do it all over again. And I went through this about 3 times between mid-February and late March, thinking something is wrong here. Basically, I've never defined what I meant by a public movement in Thelema. Golden Dawn and magic has always been a somewhat secretive path. It's something that is done privately. Yeah, people have websites and stuff, but they don't really go out there that much and say, I'm into the Hermetic mysteries. There's always been something, however, in Thelema where, although we don't preach or try to convert, the spirit of the whole thing requires us to make people aware that this is going on, that we believe that there was a fundamental change in mass psychology a century ago. And we are all being transformed by this, whether we think that's happening consciously or whether it's just happening on a deeper level. If you join in consciously, then you are participating in a transformative experience that gives you the rewards of observing that transformation in yourself and other people. If you are just letting it happen to you willy-nilly, you may not even realize that there was a shift. I'm suggesting that people look back over the past 20, 25 years and notice ways in which the world has altered. Not just environmental degradation and factors like that, but the fact that there has been much more of a global consciousness, and in virtually every country, a surfacing desire for self-determination on a collective level and on an individual level. It's come out often in very violent, warlike ways. I think the whole jihad movement in Islamic fundamentalism is partly about this. People are responding to the idea that's sort of noodling around deep inside, that they need a clearer, better defined, more autonomous way of living their own lives, separate from imported notions from elsewhere. Now, I'm not proposing that that type of solution, if you can call it that, is a good one. I'm suggesting that that is what is happening across the board, that wherever you go, people are attempting to seize more initiative for themselves and their communities, in some cases their country or their religion, in order to attain a more complete spiritual and human realization. That's the fundamental shift. It's not been that comfortable to live through. When Aleister Crowley was writing in the Book of Thoth in the 1940s, he makes a reference to the fact that it took about 4 centuries to establish the Christian era after the supposed time of Jesus Christ. And until then, there was still a pagan hangover. There wasn't really an established culture, climate of opinion, body of initiates, body of teaching that was really solidly, broadly accepted for some centuries. In Europe, that was marked by the Roman Empire formally becoming Christian or some form of official Christianity. It then began to spread out elsewhere, but it took that amount of time to establish the aeon. He expressed the hope in that book that this time it wouldn't take as long because today we have more torch bearers and a brighter light. Whether that's so, I like to think he's right, but sometimes you look around the world and think that things are pretty dark. The fundamental shifts going on are way bigger than we realize. And that's easier to see from the private path side of all this. That's easier to see your own transformation. If you're in with a group of people, you watch them go through a training process, a certain amount of self-realization, and you think, hey, this is happening. This is real stuff. This is not some self-hypnotic delusion that we're all working with. This actually happens. People can realize their own essential, vital truth systematically. Whether they attain a full mystical gnosis as a result of that, what we call in our tradition the knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel, is open to question. Some people are able to do that. They have the discipline, the determination, the imagination, and I guess the good karma, or just the plain good luck, if you like, to come through that. As far as I'm concerned as a practicing magician, Thelemite, it's not too important to me whether anybody necessarily gets to that stage of it so much as they have a certain degree of progress. The public side of Thelema is about the total progression of the world towards a greater degree of consciousness, towards a greater degree of understanding, of self-realization, self-awareness, and other awareness. Now, we do this in very small groups. I've never been with a Thelemic group that had more than 24 people in one place. But there are groups like that around the Western world and a few in Asia and Latin America as well. It's gradually spreading out here. Okay, so what is this stuff? I'm going to talk a bit about Kabbalistic psychology, as well as this idea of a new aeon and the previous aeons. There's a little bit of information that I asked to have included in the leaflets in front of us on the Kabbalistic psychology. If this starts going over people's heads, please stop me and ask me to clarify, because it's going to get a little bit hierarchically organized. I know that annoys some people. It's just the way we do it. We work with the Tree of Life diagram, not because this is the truth, but because it is a way of organizing a particular view of the universe as it is experienced by us humans. Therefore, anything else we do relates in some way to this particular Tree of Life, which in this form, in this graphic form, has been around for 500 years at least, and existed perhaps before that, certainly conceptually in the centuries prior. Let's go back, way before people were chiseling things on rocks and knocking bits of rock off to make wheels and building houses and stuff, or they were just beginning to get towards that. Basically, you had an animal with a rather sophisticated nervous system, so you've got a pretty interesting body, that was animated by what we call the nefesh. These are Hebrew terms that we've adopted into our tradition. The nefesh is defined as the animal soul or vital soul. It's the sum of your instincts, your basic programming, stuff that relates to the bottom two chakras about basic survival, fight or flight, simple existence and survival. It's not that complex. In concept, even if there's many different levels of it, and of course as our societies developed, this animal soul, this vital soul itself became more complex in its ramifications, in its different aspects. But the aim was to become a little bit more conscious, not just an animal running around, killing mammoths and exterminating Neanderthals, but actually creating a community. And from that we started going on to building the first stone huts and stuff, and coming out of our caves and developing weapons we could throw at woolly rhinoceros and things like that. We were just learning how to pull it all together. That went along just fine. We'd had a few thousand, tens of thousands of years of hanging out in these stone huts, exterminating various species of Paleolithic mammals, and gradually pulling things more together. And something further began to develop, a sense of individuality. The brain capacity was such that it was possible to observe yourself as a distinct being with unique feelings, ideas, images happening inside you. The self-consciousness, the individual self in Kabbalistic psychology, we call the ruach. The word basically means breath. Sometimes it's translated as spirit. You find this in Islamic traditions as well. Ruh is the Arabic word for the same thing, this actual animating soul that is aware that it's there. Not everybody had this at first. Not everybody was that alert. Most people were just still grubbing around, hoping they could find some roots and maybe, go on that woolly rhinoceros hunt with the others. But that was the extent of it. But there were these guys, and perhaps a few women as well, we don't have the written records, so we don't know, who were trying to put together a bigger picture of what was happening. Maybe there were these god things that were producing all this lightning and rain and forest fires and sending the animals by for us to hunt at the right moment. People began developing simple systems of magic and so on and so forth. The beginnings of religious practice began there. People got the idea that maybe this self that was indwelling the animal didn't end when the body did. Maybe it continued in some fashion in an afterlife. This is the general picture of what in our tradition we call the Aeon of Isis, the Mother Age. This really came up with Sir James Fraser's book, The Golden Bough, around about 1900, where he actually pulled together what was known from archaeology and anthropology at that time. He said, I think there was a maternal age way back.